What is going on, gunfighters? Saddle up for another episode of Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. First and foremost, I am a Christian, a servant of God, and a follower of Jesus Christ. God has blessed me to do many things in my life, for I could do nothing apart from Him. U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, did a couple of tours in Iraq. As an assaultman after my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. Also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also did several years in law enforcement, LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. Been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency. That's all I'll say about that. Been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion and West Coast regional rifle champion. Won more shooting competitions with the talent that God's given me than I can actually remember. Was blessed to be the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. Our primary job, the reason we primarily existed, was to stop active shooters. I got the opportunity to head up and be the commander of that team. I grew up around guns, hunting and shooting and competing at a very early age. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country, from whitetail on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast, and bear and elk and all manner of things. I've even been a professional big game hunter and guide. But again, most importantly, I'm a Christian. And I am your host, Michael Melito. Welcome to Gunfighter Life. Today, gunfighters, we're going to talk about some of the most artistic gun models of all time. One thing you may not pick up from the bio, because I don't talk about it, when I was in high school and pursuing different things, it became fairly apparent that I was blessed in 2 areas. One was shooting. I started competitive shooting in high school. Played a bunch of sports, but competitive shooting I kind of rose above, and it became very apparent I was blessed in that. I was also very blessed in art. Did quite well in art, excelled in art. Oil painting, watercolors, charcoal. And they were competing for time. And I kind of chose a path to go down, and I chose the firearms and shooting route to pursue. I've been a professional gunfighter most of my adult life, as you glean from the bio. But I still very much do appreciate art and like art, like going to art museums. I enjoy art, and I enjoy guns, and I really enjoy beautiful guns. Today's picks are not the most utilitarian guns. They're not the most historically relevant, world-changing guns. And beauty in art is in the eye of the beholder. Some things that some people call art, I would call disgusting and sinful. Some things that I think are very attractive on a gun, some people may think are hideous. So keep that in mind. But here are picks that I'm going to choose for the most beautiful gun models. And notice I said models. I'm not choosing like an individual gun engraved by Tiffany & Co. I'm not choosing a commemorative model with a bunch of stuff engraved on it. I'm talking about a fairly large production run gun. And not a commemorative they made 10 of or something like that. Or one that's hand engraved. I'm talking about from the factory model of beautiful gun. I think the 1911 in and of itself is a beautiful gun. However, let's be honest, the original 1911 World War I plain Jane wood grip gun is kind of homely. It's a beautiful gun. Even that gun is certainly more attractive to me, in my opinion, than a Glock, 19. However, I don't think that military iteration is the most beautiful version of that gun. There's a few that take that distinction, and it's hard to choose between them. But if I had to pick one, I'd say the Colt Combat Elite. It's a beautiful 2-tone blued slide. Not only is it more functional, I think, and more modern than the original 1911, got the undercut trigger guard. It's got good Novak combat sights. It's got an enlarged scalloped ejection port for aiding in reduction of malfunctions. It's got front slide serrations. And all that not only is more functional, it's also to me more attractive. I think it's one of the most attractive guns. Go look up a Colt Combat Elite 1911 and see if that's not a beautiful, exquisite gun. The bluing on those are exquisite. Just something about the way Colt blued guns back in the day. Now they still make this gun and they're still beautiful. The Colt bluing is a beautiful thing. And I think the Colt Combat Elite is beautiful. The other one that I think is one of the most beautiful versions of the 1911, a beautiful gun already, is the SIG GSR 1911. When these first came out, I looked at them and I thought, wow, this even predates me owning a 1911 or being into 1911s. I was a police officer, I think, at the time when they came out. And I just remember looking at those and thinking, wow, that's a gorgeous gun and a gorgeous 1911. Just the way they did the rail and the slide. It's just functional beauty in a 1911. It's just gorgeous. And some people might think that the rail detracts from the beauty of a 1911, but I think if done properly, the rail adds to the beauty of a 1911. I think that is a beautiful, beautiful gun. Before moving on from the 1911, an actual military-issued 1911 that I think is just amazingly beautiful, and I'm blessed to own one of these. 45 U.S. Marine Corps. I believe the last issued 1911. It's gorgeous. It's just beautiful. I'm blessed to own one of these. I bought one when they weren't crazy expensive. They came out, and I assumed were going to be a collector's thing, but I wanted one for duty use. I carried mine on duty as a duty gun. I've thought about selling it because they're crazy expensive now to raise money for the podcast, although if I did sell it, I don't know that I would ever buy another one. But talk about just a gorgeous, gorgeous iteration of the 1911. Whether you get the Cerakoted one or the ion bonded one, that's the one that I have. I think it's actually a little bit more attractive. At least I think it's ion bond. It's got whatever beautiful and kind of striped camo desert grips that it has. It's just gorgeous. Look one of those up and see for yourself. You're talking about a military issued handgun. It's hard to beat that as far as art. A war-fighting issued handgun, in my opinion. Let's switch gears to revolvers. One that I think is just gorgeous is the Lady Smith. You know, if you've listened for any length of time, my affinity for the J-frame and how I still think it's a practical carry gun. Now, let me be clear. I don't think this is a great choice for brand new shooters, for a woman who's never shot a gun. I'd say get them started with a 22. I'd say get them started with a long gun if it's for home defense or something like that. But anyway, if you're going to start them with a handgun, start them with a 22. But that said, I've heard time after time that heirloom gun, that gun you're going to pass down to your son, who's going to pass it down to his grandson. What about daughters? What about women? What about that handgun you're going to give to your daughter that she's going to cherish? Maybe take to college to protect herself if she's allowed to. Some states are freer in that aspect than others. She's going to have it when she's that younger lady out trying to make her way in the world. She's going to have it when she's protecting her family. She's going to have it and pass it down, God willing, to one of her daughters. What about that heirloom quality piece for the women? I think women should be armed. I think women, math bears out that statistically women are more likely to be the victim of a violent crime. Therefore, they should be armed. Let me be clear. I think it's your job as a man to protect women and children, widows and orphans and all that stuff. I believe that's part of being a man. Do you carry a gun just to protect yourself? I hope not. I hope it's to protect those around you as well. And that includes those weaker than you, physically. And yes, that's women. Bash me for being politically correct if you want. But I still think women, that said, women have every right to own a gun, and I think that they should, if they choose to do so. And talk about a beautiful heirloom quality piece. Probably one of the most functional ones. They make a Ladysmith with that classic kind of brushed stainless aluminum look and those pale blue grips. It's a good color, that kind of Tiffany scheme. Gorgeous and very functional, good modern handle. But they make one I think that's even more beautiful. That first one I think will be more functional and still beautiful. This next one is just gorgeous. I think that Smith & Wesson J-frames ought to have a hammer. I know that dissents from the common tactical opinion, but I like hammers. I'm talking an external exposed hammer. I also think they're way more attractive. The Ladysmith with the exposed hammer and the beautiful wood grips. I don't know whether they're rosewood or whatever kind of wood they are, but they are gorgeous. That gun is gorgeous. I saw one in a gun store once and thought about buying it till I saw Ladysmith on the side. I'm not judging you if you're a man and you carry a Ladysmith, but I think, again, for that firearm that's beautiful, a woman could have and carry throughout her life and pass on to her daughter, that Ladysmith would be a good choice. It's a beautiful work of art. The Smith & Wesson J-frame is already an elegant revolver with fine lines and good proportions. And that Ladysmith just gives it a even more refined look. I think it's a beautiful gun. Talking about revolvers, the Colt Python. Now, I recently did a coolest guns of all time, and I mentioned it, but I didn't put it in there. I thought the Colt Kodiak was cooler. But as far as beauty goes, the Colt Python, and not the new ones, the old ones, the blued Colt Pythons. I think the 4-inch or the 3-inch kind of have that best balance if you're talking about beauty. But the old blued Colt Pythons are they're works of art. They're literal works of art. That rib on the barrel, the proportions, the lines, they are just magnificent. So you talk about a beautiful, manly heirloom quality piece. One of those old Colt Pythons are just literal works of art. Functional, deadly works of art. And what man doesn't appreciate that? Now these are in order of kind of how I thought of them and wrote them down. Not in any particular categorical order or alphabetical order or anything. The Ruger number 1. The Ruger number 1 falling block single shot rifle. Just gorgeous. Not only is it a work of art in its just regular appearance, it's a work of art in how it functions and how it works. Just a smooth, solid block of steel. Simple, beautiful, and robust. Just a great design. And they could have just put a simple lever on it, but they put a fairly ornate, beautiful lever. It's not just a good functional single shot killing machine. It's elegant. There are many iterations of this. Picking a model, I'm a sucker for the international models, the ones where the fore end goes all the way to the stock. For these, it's got to have iron sights. Not only are iron sights do I like them on a gun like this, I think they're beautiful. I think the way that Ruger does those iron sights adds not just functionality, but beauty to the firearm. I think they are just literal hunting works of art. Very similar in a bolt action, the Ruger RSI. Full-length stock, Mannlicher, however you want to say it, full-length. They are oftentimes called the RSI in the Model 77 bolt action. I think the bolt actions are 99% as beautiful as the single shots, and they give you repeatable firepower. I think the RSI version, where the stock goes all the way out to the end with that beautiful end piece, and again the iron sights. And I think this one in stainless. If you wanted the Ruger number 1 in blued, I could see the appeal. I think the stainless one in the bolt action looks even better. I think it's just gorgeous. For a production bolt action rifle, the Ruger 77 RSI Stainless International, just again, stunning. I think you could put that in an art museum next to a Fabergé egg, or some German glass, or a fine piece of Tiffany jewelry, and be every bit as beautiful. They're gorgeous, gorgeous guns. If you wanted a gun like that, that was a military issued gun, I think the most beautiful military issued rifle of all time, the Mannlicher Schonhauer, which I think is where the Ruger honestly got a lot of its looks from. But for a military issued rifle, that old Mannlicher is a Greek issued firearm. It's just beautiful. Just the stock is beautiful. The bolt handle is beautiful. The proportions of it are gorgeous. It's got nice wood for a military rifle. Again, not the most historically relevant, like an AK-47 or an M1 Garand, but certainly, in my opinion, more attractive looking. Just a beautiful, elegant gun. Talking about another kind of art, poetry, literature, art, Hemingway. As I understand, and verify this for yourself, but he was quite fond of that Mannlicher rifle. Yes, Hemingway was a hunter, a killer, an outdoorsman. Very artistic, and I think very manly. I didn't know him personally, obviously, but he kind of seems like a man's man to me. One that I think is beautiful, and it's hard to compare it to the 1911. The original version was a police military gun, but I don't think the actual military ones are particularly beautiful. A lot of people may disagree, but I think the new production SIG P210 target is gorgeous. Not only are the lines nice, the fit and finish nice, the wood grips, not just the contours, but also the styling and the checkering, I think they're better looking than the originals. Again, I'm not talking about historic, I'm not talking about collectible, I'm talking about sheer art beauty. I think the new target version of the SIG P210 is prettier, is more attractive than the old military police issued ones. Those are pretty attractive for a military issued handgun. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about most beautiful models. And I think that new target SIG P210 is gorgeous. Let's talk about, in my opinion, the worst one on the list today. In fact, if I do a worst handguns ever, it'll probably be on the list as far as function goes, because it doesn't really work well. This is one of the guns that gave me the 3-year rule, meaning if a gun first comes out, don't buy it if it's something you're actually going to use and carry and trust your life to. If it's just a range toy or you're a collector, that's one thing. But if you're going to trust your life to something, don't be a beta tester in a gunfight. Get something proven. I broke that rule. And when it came out, I had listened to the hype and all the marketing, and I bought a Remington R51. The thing sucked. It was a horrible gun. It was horribly unreliable. It did not shoot point of aim, point of impact with anything I shot in it. But it was attractive. So I will give it that. It had that kind of 1950s retro chic look. It didn't really look like any modern handgun. In its dimensions, its size, its sleekness, and it was 9mm. I thought it might make a decent carry gun. But it didn't, because one of the caveats, one of the things of a carry gun, no matter how attractive it is or isn't, or good it feels in the hands or whatever else, it has to function, and it just didn't. But if you're talking about a attractive gun, I think that Remington R51 really is an attractive, beautiful gun. If you're talking about a modern try at an attractive carry gun, it's pretty good looking. Shame it didn't work. Which reminds me of another 1950s kind of vintage look classic gun. Talk about a cool looking gun. And this is a different kind of art. This is kind of that 50s space age kind of look. The Whitney Wolverine. Look those up. They're awesome. Gotten to handle a few, both the original and one of the remade ones when they came out. I forget how many years ago now. But the Whitney Wolverine doesn't really look like anything else. It looks more like a 1950s magazine ad for a kid's space pistol or something you would see in a B movie about aliens. But it absolutely was a real gun, 22 long rifle. From all accounts, I think it was about as reliable as a lot of other guns in that era. And just talk about cool looking. If you're talking about a really cool, beautiful 1950s kind of work of art, like a 1957 Chevy of handguns, that Whitney Wolverine is gorgeous. Let's talk about a Remington rifle that actually did work. I've never owned one, but I have never heard anything about them being unreliable. Remington 700s, they're good. They're functional. I wouldn't necessarily call them attractive, any of the models I can think of. But what I would call attractive is the Remington 673. Now, this was a later iteration of the Model 600, the 660, referred to as a Mohawk. Those are good guns in their own right, but their stocks are a little lackluster. When they came out again with a new iteration of this quick, handy carbine, the 673, I think they really took the panache, stylish elegance of that handy carbine to the next level. That laminated wood stock, that contrast and color, that rib on the barrel, I think just beautiful. Although I do kind of like the dog leg on the original Mohawks. It was made for some functional features. I don't think it's particularly attractive. I think that 673 is the most attractive bolt-action Remington rifle ever made. Next, you'll know my affection and affinity for the Beretta 92. In my opinion, and people disagree with this, and that's fine, the finest combat handgun. Period. Full stop. The Beretta 92. But I think the most beautiful model, production model, not some fancy engraved thing, production model, and not like the Centennial, which is a special, very limited run. I'm talking about a fairly decently issued number of Beretta 92s. The most beautiful one is the Enox. Stainless on stainless. Just beautiful. I like stainless. I think real bluing, if done really well and polished, can be quite attractive, but I think like the Brunton finish on a regular Beretta is kind of lackluster, as much as I like Berettas. But I think that Enox, that stainless on aluminum, that just aesthetic of that color, I think it's awesome. I think it's beautiful. It's functional. It's elegant. I think that although it's a legendary workhorse, I think the lines and design of the Beretta are just second to none in just raw beauty in a combat handgun. Not only are they crazy reliable, crazy accurate, they're crazy beautiful too. And I'm going to wrap this episode up on two models. The firsts, at least in my mind. The first one I thought of when I thought of really beautiful guns. When I was a kid, I saw one of these. I don't even remember how old I was, but I remember this gun. It was a Ruger Super Red Hawk in .454 Casull. And it was the one, and it was probably the first gun I'd ever seen like this in that gunmetal gray finish that Ruger did back in the 90s. It must have been in the 90s. Maybe early 2000s, somewhere in that era. But they came out with this not really stainless that you would think of, and not blued, but like a dark gray. I don't even know how to describe it. Just that finish was amazing. And just the contours, that Ruger, the cylinder, the barrel, just the lines of it. They used to do a grip that was, I think, the most attractive of the grips they've ever done. It was good functional rubber, but it had really pretty wood inserts to go into the grips. I think it just all tied together so nicely. I remember looking at that gun and thinking, that thing is beautiful. It was a friend of my father's. I never got to shoot it, anything like that, I don't think. But I just remember seeing one, and every time I see one at a gun show, I think, that is beautiful. They did some rifles in that same finish, the 77s. I think that finish is, in and of itself, is beautiful, but it left such an impression that when I was thinking of this episode, that was the first gun I think that I thought of, was that Ruger Super Red Hawk and that gunmetal gray finish. I don't even know the name for that finish, but if you see one, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's not a stainless, bright, shiny, or even matte stainless look. It's not blued. It's like a dark, matte gray. Like a granite kind of gray color, and it is exquisite. Anyway, I think those are beautiful. I think they're just beautiful handguns. So that was the first one I thought of. The very first one, as far as the oldest one on this list, is coming up. And that is, I guess you can't technically, by the ATF's definition, it's not a firearm. But it certainly is, in my opinion, deserving of this category. And that is the Pennsylvania/Kentucky flintlock rifles. I say flintlocks, I think flintlock, the actual locking mechanism with the clamp and the actual piece of stone and the piece of leather in there, I think that's more attractive than a percussion. Even if less functional, I think it's beautiful. But those, again, stocks that go all the way out to the end, beautiful wood stock, beautiful octagon barrels, or the round barrels, but let's be honest, round barrels are far more common today, so I kind of like that octagon barrel kind of look. A lot of them came not special edition, but a lot of these were like handmade, so they're kind of one of a kind. The whole genre is beautiful, and most of them had some kind of brass on the stock. And they didn't just slap brass on there. This was the fashion of the day. This was a quality machine, and they put quite a bit of detail into it. Also, the brass, not just the trigger guards, which are beautiful, but the brass inlays in the stock. They're just beautiful. One of the things that help us settle and civilize this country. And not only were they functional and arguably better in the hands of the civilian militia than the military arms of the time, they were elegant and beautiful, far more attractive than the mass-issued British muskets of the day that the redcoats had, or that regular standing armies of the time usually had, that Napoleonic era. Those Kentucky/Pennsylvania long rifles were not only, I think, better, they were far more beautiful, far more attractive. I think they're just a beautiful, beautiful gun. I think that's a good place to end it. The very first, at least as far as dates go historically, our American heritage is kind of rooted in that beautiful gun culture. And a lot of people talk down about gun culture today, but I think gun culture is part of a beautiful American heritage that we need to keep alive. I've been all over this beautiful country, and some places have a far better gun culture than others. Maybe that's an episode for another day. Probably not places you would think of, or places you would think would have a great gun culture that I don't think do. But maybe that's an episode for another day. But beautiful gun culture is part of our American history and our American heritage and our American art. Do a whole museum on gun art of America, and that'd be awesome. Anyway, with that, I hope you enjoyed this episode today. If you enjoy this content, guys, I stepped down from a fairly well-paying management job to do this podcast full time to give you guys good content. If you appreciate this content, if you want to support it, if you want to be a good capitalist and talk about supporting a small American business, God, I couldn't do anything without him, but employee numbers 1, me. If you want to support that, if you want to support the podcast, I'd encourage you to do so. It'd be much appreciated. I'd be very humbled and blessed. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. With that, I want to say thanks for listening. I'm going to throw out a tactical tip of the day. Tactical tips. Some things that you can do to maybe make your gun a little bit more, not just attractive, but also functional. I'm not a big fan of black guns. I know it's kind of in vogue, the black rifle thing, but the color black, it doesn't blend in very well in most natural environments. Even most urban environments. Most rooms are not black. Yeah, black blends in well at night, but as soon as you shine a light on it, it doesn't. And any other color in the dark will look black. Anyway, that's my spiel about black guns. I don't particularly like black guns, and I often paint my guns. The carry gun that I have right now, I don't think it makes a list, but it's quite attractive. It's a SIG P226, single action only. After breaking the set of grips that I had on it, I got some more modern, more robust, I think they're G10 grips. They've held up quite well. Anyway, I camoed the grips and I camoed parts of the slide. Kind of a pale Spanish moss color green and a bright, I don't know what I would call it. It's called Eden, the color, but toxic green and black. Now I do hike with it. I have hunted with this gun. But a big reason I camo the grips is because I often wear button-up shirts. They're what I would call Gucci flage. They're kind of plaid or kind of subdued tie-dye looking natural colors that don't look like traditional hunting camo. They'll blend in pretty much any environment. And then also my carry gun, which I carry concealed if I'm not out in the woods or whatever, or in the house, it blends in with the shirt, which just helps with the concealment. If you're wearing black clothing, a black gun stands out a lot more if you happen to the wind blow your shirt back or somebody's looking at you or whatever. Unless you're wearing, again, a black shirt or black pants, black stands out pretty well. So why would you want your concealed carry gun to be black? That being said, you can camo it yourself. If you don't want to destroy the whole gun, you can just camo grips if you have a gun that takes grips. You can camo whole rifles. Anyway, the tactical tip, eBay, I'm sure probably Amazon, they have the little stencils that work quite well. They're not crazy expensive. You can just go with literally regular spray paint. There's nothing wrong with that. You might want to practice on a magazine or another piece of kit that is similar, an old phone case or something. I practiced on one of my old Ruger 1022s before I went ahead and did this on my Scar 17, but both turned out a lot more camo than they were when I started. Getting those stencils, and if you want, Cerakote is you need quite a bit of infrastructure and knowledge to do Cerakote properly. There's also Duracoat and some other brands. Alumahide, I've had good experiences with both those. I think Duracoat or Durabake and Alumahide. Some you actually have to bake in an oven, not a big deal. But if you want that, I've had some of those finishes hold up, I think, in my opinion, as good or better than Cerakote. You can do that yourself. You can make your gun not only, I think, more attractive, but also more functional. A lot of those coatings are a lot more rust preventative also if you're doing it on metal than the actual factory finish. Not all the time. A Glock factory slide's pretty rust resistant, but sometimes it's better to put your own coating on there. Those stencils, then Alumahide, Durabake, Duracoat. Oh, and Ceramicoat I think is also on. They're all pretty good. Just follow the instructions. If you're doing it on a gun, probably you actually want to read the instructions on these men. But those stencils aren't expensive. The gun coating itself is not expensive. One of my wife's love languages is quality time. Some things we've done in the past are gun projects like camoing the Scar 17. The tactical verse of the day. Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, I will not fear. What shall man do unto me? It's good to enjoy beauty in art. I think that's a beautiful thing for the soul. When God said, make the things according to the pattern, there's a lot of ornate beauty in the tabernacle to be constructed for the ark. He didn't just say build a box. He put art into that, and he gifted men. Read Exodus 35, I believe the chapter is, where he gifted them in all manner of workmanship and art. I think there's a beautiful thing for appreciating art. But beware of coveting. Be content with such things as you have. I appreciate all these guns, but I'm not resentful that I don't have most of them. I came into this world naked, and that's how I'm going to leave it. Keep it in perspective. Remember the first couple of chapters of Ecclesiastes. With that, men, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.